I had always loved the gym. The smell of iron, the sound of weights clanging, the rhythmic breathing of people pushing their limits. It all made me feel alive. At 25, I was in the prime of my life, ambitious about building my body and testing my own strength. Every day after work, I would head to the local gym, determined to push myself further than the day before. Fitness wasn't just about looks for me. It was a form of meditation, a way to challenge my mind as much as my body. And yet, despite my dedication, I sometimes felt that something was missing. I could see the gains, but I also realized that I lacked guidance. Someone who had walked the path before me, someone whose experience could refine my efforts and inspire me beyond the exercises themselves. It was during one of these evening sessions that I first noticed him. A man who must have been in his 60s, yet he moved with a grace and energy that defied his age. He wasn't like the other regulars, who either focused solely on cardio machines or lifted weights with a single-minded intensity. There was a calm confidence about him, a subtle command of the room that made people naturally respect him without him needing to say much. Over time, I noticed that he was not just attending the gym, but observing, understanding, and occasionally giving advice to those who seemed receptive. One day, he approached me, not in an intrusive way, but with a friendly, warm smile and commented on my push-up form. At first, I felt self-conscious, but there was something in his tone, a mix of wisdom and gentle humor, that made me open up to him. That day marked the beginning of an unusual, but profoundly meaningful, friendship. Our interactions became frequent. Every session, he would share a new tip, a small trick, or a motivational insight. He spoke about the importance of posture, the subtle activation of muscles, and the mental discipline required to achieve results that lasted. But beyond the exercises, he shared stories from his life. Tales of perseverance, failure, and small victories that had shaped him. Listening to him, I realized that his lessons went far beyond the gym. He taught me patience, consistency, and the quiet strength of observing progress without succumbing to frustration. There was a softness in his demeanor that invited trust, and slowly, I found myself anticipating his presence as much as I anticipated my own workout milestones. It felt like discovering a mentor who understood me more than I understood myself, someone whose guidance was as comforting as it was instructive. One evening, while demonstrating a new push-up variation, he adjusted my posture with a careful hand, ensuring that I wouldn't strain my lower back. There was a surprising tenderness in the way he guided me, firm, yet gentle, like someone who genuinely cared about my well-being. I could feel the warmth of his presence and the subtle encouragement in his touch, and it made the experience unexpectedly uplifting. It wasn't just the physical guidance, it was the emotional reassurance. I felt seen, appreciated, and motivated, in a way that transcended the typical student-trainer dynamic. Our friendship had evolved into a rare bond, one where mentorship and companionship intertwined seamlessly, creating a safe space for growth, encouragement, and unspoken connection. Over the weeks, our sessions became more than just workouts. We began talking about books, philosophy, music, and dreams. He had a way of making ordinary observations sound profound, and his laughter carried a genuine joy that was contagious. I found myself sharing thoughts and feelings I hadn't expressed to anyone else. Hopes, fears, ambitions, and even insecurities. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a comfort that only grew with time. The gym became a sanctuary, not just of physical exercise, but of emotional renewal. In his presence, I felt lighter, more confident, and inspired to push myself in all aspects of life. The connection we shared was unique, a blend of admiration, respect, and subtle affection, without needing to be named or defined. As the seasons changed, so did our routines, but our bond remained unwavering. He encouraged me to challenge myself, not just physically but mentally. He introduced me to meditative breathing exercises, encouraged reflection, and reminded me that strength was not only measured in muscles, but in resilience and compassion. I noticed the impact of his guidance on myself. My focus sharpened, my stamina improved, and my perspective on life shifted subtly but profoundly. Every interaction with him left me richer in knowledge and deeper in understanding, and I cherished these moments more than I could express. There was a quiet romance in the way our friendship unfolded, not one of passion, but of hearts aligning in mutual respect, inspiration, and gentle fondness. One evening, after an intense session, we sat outside the gym, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark sky. We laughed over trivial mistakes, shared insights about life, and silently appreciated the simplicity of being in each other's company. In that moment, I realized that our friendship had transformed into something rare, a bond that defied age, labels, and expectations. It was a romance of minds and hearts, a connection built on trust, admiration, and the joy of shared growth. I felt gratitude for his presence, knowing that I had found not only a mentor but a companion who inspired me to become a better version of myself every single day. By the time I left the gym that night, I understood that this relationship, built on respect, warmth, and subtle romantic undertones, was one of the most enriching experiences of my life. He had shown me that love and connection do not always conform to conventional definitions. Sometimes, it is in quiet moments, shared laughter, gentle guidance, and unwavering support that the most profound bonds are formed. Our story was not about passion or desire, but about emotional intimacy, trust, and the beauty of friendship evolving into a heartwarming, inspirational romance. And as I walked home, I knew I was not the same person who had entered the gym months ago. I was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more grateful for the extraordinary bond that had become the cornerstone of my life. After the weeks of consistent training, our friendship deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was no longer just about exercises or gym routines. It became a meeting of minds, hearts, and shared experiences. Every evening, I would arrive with the expectation of seeing him, eager not only to learn but to simply be in his presence. His calm smile, the gentle nod he gave when I completed a set, or the little jokes he made about my stubbornness. They had begun to feel like small but significant moments that brightened my day. I realized that this wasn't a typical friendship. It was something far more rare, a connection that transcended age and conventional norms, and yet it felt entirely natural. During one session, we were working on pull-ups. My arms were shaking from fatigue, and my frustration was rising with every failed attempt. Sensing my struggle, he stepped closer, his presence comforting in a way that made the room feel warmer, calmer. "You've got this," he said, his voice steady but filled with encouragement. "Don't fight it. Work with your body. Feel each movement." I tried again, focusing on his words, and this time I managed 2 more perfect repetitions. He clapped softly, smiling. "See? That's the power of patience and trust," he said. His praise wasn't overbearing. It was gentle, yet it filled me with a strange sense of pride, as though his recognition validated more than just my physical effort. It touched my spirit. As we continued to train together, our conversations drifted to other topics. He would talk about his youth, the adventures he had, the challenges he overcame, and the lessons he learned. I found myself sharing my own fears, ambitions, and small victories. There was a comfort in being vulnerable with him, a safety in his attentive listening. Sometimes, when I spoke about my insecurities or doubts, he would place a reassuring hand on my shoulder, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but in a gesture that conveyed support, presence, and understanding. In those moments, I felt an emotional closeness that was deeply reassuring. I realized that romance doesn't always have to be passionate. Sometimes, it manifests in care, trust, and the feeling of being truly seen. One evening, after a particularly challenging session, we sat on the gym floor, stretching and catching our breath. The room was dim, with only the faint glow of the overhead lights reflecting off the equipment. "You've improved more than you realize," he said softly. "Not just in strength, but in focus, confidence, and consistency. That's the true mark of growth." I looked at him, noticing the faint lines of age on his face, the softness in his eyes, and the genuine pride he seemed to feel. I realized that I valued him not only as a mentor but as a companion who inspired me to be better, to push myself not for others, but for myself. Over the following days, we introduced small challenges for each other. I would try new exercises he suggested, and he would share techniques that I had never seen before. Sometimes we laughed at our mistakes. My awkward attempts at balancing on a medicine ball, or his playful teasing when I overthought a simple exercise. Those shared laughs became our secret language, small threads weaving our connection tighter. The gym, once a place of routine and sweat, had transformed into a canvas for our friendship, a space where encouragement, subtle affection, and trust painted a vivid tapestry of emotions. I also began to notice the quiet ways he showed care. He would bring extra towels or water bottles, remind me to rest when I pushed too hard, and occasionally suggest techniques to prevent strain. His attentiveness was never intrusive. It was respectful, gentle, and consistent. Each gesture, no matter how small, reinforced the emotional bond between us. I found myself looking forward not only to the workouts but to these moments of subtle intimacy, these quiet affirmations of friendship and mutual respect. It was intoxicating in a way that had nothing to do with physical desire, yet everything to do with emotional closeness. One weekend, the gym was empty in the late afternoon, and we decided to try a new outdoor routine in the nearby park. The air was crisp, the sun dipping toward the horizon, casting golden hues over the trees. We jogged side by side, then paused to stretch. I noticed how comfortable I felt around him, how natural our conversation flowed, how laughter came easily. "You've really grown," he said quietly, his eyes scanning the skyline. "Not just in fitness, but in patience, confidence, and self-awareness. I admire that." There was a warmth in his tone that sent a ripple of gratitude through me. In that moment, I understood that what we shared wasn't conventional, wasn't easily categorized. It was a deep emotional resonance, a bond that defied definition yet felt undeniably real. As the weeks turned into months, our connection evolved further. We started sharing favorite books, exchanging thoughts on philosophy, music, and life lessons. Evenings at the gym or in the park became not only physical training sessions but moments of emotional and intellectual nourishment. There was a subtle romantic undertone to our interactions, not in overt gestures, but in the way we prioritized each other's company, in the laughter and quiet moments of understanding, in the trust that had grown between us. The bond we had cultivated was profound, layered with respect, admiration, and emotional intimacy. I realized that this friendship, so tender and supportive, had become one of the most meaningful relationships in my life, teaching me that love is not always loud or visible. It can be quiet, nurturing, and transformative. As the months passed, the rhythm of our friendship became a part of my daily life. I would wake up each morning with the anticipation of our evening session, not merely for the workout, but for the conversation, the laughter, and the subtle emotional reassurance that his presence provided. The gym, which once felt like just a place to strengthen muscles, had transformed into a space of growth in every sense: physical, mental, and emotional. There was a quiet magic in the predictability of our routine, yet a freshness in the way each day brought a new lesson, a new insight, a new story to share. I began to realize that what I was experiencing went far beyond mentorship. It was a bond that had woven itself into the very fabric of my life, influencing the way I approached challenges, relationships, and self-discovery. One evening, after a particularly intense leg workout, we sat on the edge of the gym floor, stretching and catching our breath. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of the air conditioning and the occasional clink of weights from the empty corner of the gym. "You've come a long way," he said softly, watching me carefully as I stretched. There was a warmth in his tone, a pride that felt deeply personal, as if he had a stake not just in my physical progress, but in the evolution of my character. I felt a surge of gratitude, a sense of being truly seen and appreciated. It was in these quiet moments that the emotional resonance of our bond became most evident. Not in words, but in shared presence, in mutual understanding, in the silent acknowledgement that we valued each other's growth. Over time, we began to share more personal stories, often revolving around lessons learned from life's unpredictability. He would talk about challenges he had faced, loss, change, the necessity of patience, and the power of resilience. I would listen, fascinated not only by the content of his stories, but by the calm, reflective way he narrated them. In turn, I shared my own fears, ambitions, and insecurities, finding comfort in the fact that he listened without judgment, offering insight only when appropriate. There was an intimacy in these exchanges, a quiet trust that formed the foundation of a deep emotional connection. I realized that romance doesn't always manifest in physical gestures. Sometimes, it exists in the act of being genuinely understood and valued. Our workouts became increasingly collaborative. He would suggest variations, challenge me to push my limits, and observe with keen attention, offering encouragement and subtle corrections. One evening, while attempting a new core exercise, I struggled to maintain balance. He stepped closer, gently adjusting my posture, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but in a manner that conveyed care, attentiveness, and a shared commitment to improvement. The proximity was comforting, and I felt a warmth spread through me. Not desire, but an emotional connection so profound that it left me both motivated and serene. In his presence, I found a rare blend of challenge and comfort, discipline and emotional support, which transformed my perspective on personal growth. Our conversations gradually drifted into reflections on the broader aspects of life: happiness, fulfillment, the meaning of connection. He would ask thought-provoking questions, encouraging me to examine my priorities, values, and the kind of person I aspired to be. I, in turn, offered my own perspectives, finding that he listened with genuine curiosity, respect, and subtle admiration. These discussions, often held in the quiet corners of the gym after closing hours, became a form of intimacy that transcended physical proximity. It was a romance of the mind and heart, built on trust, shared values, and emotional resonance. I realized that I had come to rely on his insights, not just for fitness, but for navigating life's uncertainties with confidence and clarity. One late afternoon, we ventured outside the gym to the nearby park, where the golden hues of the setting sun reflected off the still surface of the pond. We walked side by side, our conversation flowing effortlessly between philosophy, memories, and future aspirations. At one point, he paused, gazing at the horizon. "Life is about growth in every sense," he said. "Not just strength, not just success, but the ability to connect deeply, to empathize, and to inspire others along the way." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words resonate within me. It was a moment of shared understanding, a realization that the bond we had cultivated was rare, valuable, and transformative. The subtle romantic undertone lay not in grand gestures, but in mutual respect, admiration, and the quiet joy of sharing meaningful moments. As our friendship matured, I began to notice the smaller, more nuanced ways he expressed care. He would remind me to rest after strenuous sessions, offer insights into injury prevention, and occasionally share thoughtful observations about my posture or routine. Each gesture, though simple, carried with it a profound sense of attentiveness and thoughtfulness. There was a rhythm to our interactions, a balance of encouragement, guidance, and emotional support that reinforced the depth of our connection. I realized that love, in its most enduring form, often exists in these subtle, consistent acts of care and presence. Over time, our bond began to influence the way I approached not only fitness but life itself. I found myself more patient, more reflective, and more attuned to the needs and emotions of those around me. The gym, once a mere space for physical exertion, had become a sanctuary for emotional growth, intellectual exchange, and subtle romantic connection. The relationship we had nurtured was not about passion or desire, but about profound companionship, trust, and shared growth. I began to see him not just as a mentor, but as a partner in a journey of self-discovery, someone whose influence and presence shaped the contours of my everyday life in ways both tangible and intangible. By the end of that season, I realized that our connection had evolved into something extraordinary. It was a romance of the heart and mind, a bond that defied societal expectations, age, and conventional definitions of love. We had created a space where emotional intimacy, mutual respect, and subtle admiration coexisted harmoniously, fostering growth and joy. The lessons I had learned extended far beyond the gym, about resilience, empathy, and the transformative power of meaningful connection. And as I walked home one evening, reflecting on the weeks and months we had spent together, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the rare, enduring, and deeply romantic friendship that had become an essential part of my life. As the seasons shifted once again, I began to realize how much our friendship had become the backbone of my daily life. Each evening, I looked forward not only to the exercises but to the moments of laughter, reflection, and subtle connection that accompanied them. The gym, with its familiar clangs and rhythms, had transformed from a space of routine effort into a sanctuary of emotional growth and intellectual exchange. It was remarkable how a simple bond, built initially on guidance and mentorship, had evolved into a profound friendship, layered with trust, understanding, and an understated romantic resonance that neither of us had to define aloud. One evening, after a particularly challenging upper body session, we sat on the edge of the gym mats, catching our breath. "You've grown so much," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of pride that felt deeply personal, not just in strength, but in patience, confidence, and clarity of thought. I felt a warmth spread through me. Not pride alone, but the quiet satisfaction of being seen and appreciated. There was something unspoken in his gaze, a recognition of the effort I had put into more than just my physical form. He acknowledged the transformation in my mind and spirit. That moment, simple as it was, felt like an affirmation of everything we had built together, an emotional milestone that quietly deepened our bond. Our sessions began to include more reflective exercises. While performing stretches or core routines, we would discuss philosophy, personal goals, and the subtle art of maintaining balance in life. "Strength," he said one evening as we rested on the mats, "is not just measured in muscles or endurance. It is measured in the ability to remain grounded, to act with integrity, and to uplift those around you." I absorbed his words, realizing that the wisdom he shared extended far beyond fitness. It was life advice, mentoring that shaped my perspective on relationships, challenges, and my own sense of purpose. The emotional depth of our interactions, coupled with the shared physical exertion, created a unique intimacy that was both comforting and inspiring. On a quiet afternoon, he suggested we try a new training spot, a secluded park near a small lake. The sun was low, casting golden reflections on the water, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. As we warmed up, I noticed how at ease I felt in his presence, the way our laughter came naturally, and the ease with which conversations flowed between us. It was in these serene moments, away from the hustle of the gym, that our connection truly shone. I realized that the subtle romantic undertones of our bond weren't dependent on overt gestures. They existed in shared smiles, in laughter that lingered longer than usual, and in the quiet understanding that we valued each other's presence above all else. Over the following weeks, our friendship took on new dimensions. We began challenging each other not just physically but intellectually. He would pose thought experiments, philosophical questions, and hypothetical scenarios, and I would respond with my own reflections. Sometimes our debates were lighthearted, teasing one another playfully. Other times, they were profound, leading to long silences where both of us would contemplate the perspectives shared. I found that these moments of intellectual intimacy created a unique layer of romantic resonance, an appreciation for each other's minds, a recognition that emotional and intellectual connection could be just as compelling, if not more, than physical attraction. There were small gestures that continued to enrich our bond. He would notice when I was tense, suggesting breathing exercises or short meditation breaks. He would remind me to stay hydrated, adjust my posture, or offer encouragement when I doubted myself. Each act, however minor, reinforced the trust, care, and subtle affection between us. I began to understand that love, in its most enduring form, could exist without dramatic declarations. It could manifest in consistent attention, shared experiences, and the mutual commitment to each other's growth and well-being. This realization transformed how I approached not only our friendship but other relationships in my life. One evening, after an extended outdoor session, we sat on a bench overlooking the lake, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple. Silence stretched comfortably between us, punctuated by the occasional call of birds returning to their nests. "You've become someone I truly admire," he said softly, his gaze lingering on the horizon. "Not just for what you've accomplished here, but for who you are, thoughtful, resilient, and open to learning." I felt a deep surge of emotion, a combination of gratitude, admiration, and subtle romantic warmth that words could hardly capture. In that moment, I realized that our bond had become something rare and extraordinary, an emotional intimacy that transcended conventional labels, a connection that nourished both heart and mind. As months turned into a full year of consistent training and companionship, I reflected on the journey we had shared. What began as mentorship had blossomed into a profound, emotionally rich friendship with romantic undertones, rooted in trust, respect, and genuine care. The lessons I had learned about patience, self-awareness, resilience, and the quiet power of meaningful connection extended far beyond the gym, shaping my approach to life, relationships, and personal growth. And while neither of us had ever defined the nature of our bond explicitly, it was clear that we had cultivated something beautiful, a romance of the mind, heart, and spirit, tender, enduring, and transformative. Walking home that evening, I felt a sense of fulfillment and wonder. I realized that love could take many forms, and sometimes the most profound kind was one that thrived quietly, steadily, and unassumingly. It was in shared laughter, subtle gestures of care, and the unwavering presence of someone who believed in you that true romance and connection flourished. And as I looked back at the gym, illuminated softly in the twilight, I knew that our story, our extraordinary bond, was far from ordinary. It was a testament to the power of trust, mentorship, emotional intimacy, and the gentle, enduring magic of friendship that had blossomed into a heartwarming, inspirational romance. Time has a strange way of revealing the true value of people in our lives. When I first walked into the gym months ago, I thought I was simply beginning a journey of physical fitness. I wanted stronger muscles, better endurance, and a more confident appearance. What I never expected was that I would meet someone who would influence my life far beyond the walls of that gym. The older man who once approached me with a simple piece of advice had slowly become one of the most important people in my life. Our connection had grown through countless workouts, long conversations, shared laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Looking back, I realized that what we had built together was not just a friendship. It was a bond that had shaped who I was becoming. By this time, nearly a year had passed since the day we first met. My body had changed significantly. My shoulders were broader, my posture was stronger, and my confidence had grown in ways that surprised even me. But more importantly, my mindset had changed. I had learned patience, discipline, and emotional awareness. Every time I looked at my reflection in the mirror after a workout, I remembered his voice reminding me that true strength came from consistency and self-respect. Those words stayed with me not only in the gym but in every aspect of my life. Our routine had become almost ritualistic. I would arrive at the gym in the evening, and he would already be there, warming up calmly as if he had been waiting. We greeted each other with relaxed smiles, and without saying much we would begin our session. Sometimes we trained hard, pushing each other to finish difficult sets. Other times we took things slowly, focusing on form and breathing while talking about life. One evening, after finishing a long workout, we sat together near the gym window. Outside, the sky was fading into deep shades of purple and blue. The city lights were slowly turning on, and the gym was nearly empty. He looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You know, when I first saw you here, I could tell you had determination. But determination alone isn't enough. You also needed patience." I smiled and replied, "And I guess you decided to teach me that." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I simply saw a younger version of myself." His words stayed with me long after that evening. As our conversations continued over the following weeks, I realized that he had experienced a lifetime of challenges. He had faced failures, heartbreaks, career struggles, and moments of loneliness. But instead of becoming bitter, He had chosen to grow stronger and wiser. Listening to him changed my perspective. I started to understand that life was not just about achievements or success. It was about learning from every experience and appreciating the people who walked beside you during the journey. One Saturday afternoon, he invited me to take a walk in the park after our workout. The weather was pleasant, and the sunlight filtered gently through the trees. Families were walking along the paths, children were playing near the lake, and the air felt peaceful. We walked slowly, talking about different things: music, books, memories from childhood, and dreams about the future. At one point, he stopped near the lake and looked at the calm water. "Life moves fast," he said quietly. "One day you're young and full of questions. The next day you realize that the real value of life is the people you meet along the way." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant, because in that moment, I realized that he had become more than just a mentor. He had become someone whose presence brought calmness and inspiration to my life. Our friendship also started influencing my daily habits. I became more focused at work, more patient with people, and more appreciative of simple moments. Even my friends noticed the change. One of them asked me one day, "Bro, what happened to you? You seem more confident these days." I laughed and simply said, "Good training." But deep down, I knew it was much more than that. Back at the gym, our training sessions continued to evolve. Sometimes he challenged me with new exercises, pushing me beyond my comfort zone. Other times he encouraged me to teach beginners who were struggling just like I once had. "Helping others will make you stronger," he told me. At first I was hesitant, but gradually I began giving small pieces of advice to new gym members. To my surprise, I enjoyed it. It reminded me of the first time he had helped me. Months passed, and the bond between us continued to deepen in a quiet and meaningful way. We didn't need constant words to understand each other anymore. Sometimes a simple look or smile was enough. One evening, after finishing our workout, we sat outside the gym on a small bench. The cool night air felt refreshing after the intense training. He looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "You've changed a lot since the day we met," he said. I smiled. "That's because of you." He shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "It's because of you. I only showed you the path. You walked it yourself." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. In that quiet moment, I realized something important. Our connection had never needed labels or explanations. It was built on respect, trust, shared experiences, and genuine care. And sometimes those are the strongest kinds of relationships. As time moved forward, our story continued, not as something dramatic or complicated, but as a steady friendship that brought meaning and inspiration to both our lives. The gym where we had first met remained our meeting place, but the impact of our bond extended far beyond those walls. He had helped me discover a stronger version of myself. And in return, I believe I had brought new energy and companionship into his life. That night, as I walked home after training, I looked back at the gym building glowing softly under the streetlights. I realized that some of the most important relationships in life begin in the most ordinary places. A simple gym, a simple conversation, and a friendship that grows stronger with time. Time continued to move forward, yet the connection between us seemed to grow deeper with every passing week. What had once begun as a simple gym friendship had slowly transformed into something far more meaningful. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was gradual, like the steady growth of strength in the body after months of disciplined training. Every conversation, every shared moment, every laugh we exchanged had quietly built a bond that neither of us could ignore anymore. One evening, after finishing our workout, we remained inside the gym long after most people had left. The lights were dimmer than usual, and the quiet atmosphere created a peaceful calm. We sat on the wooden bench near the window where we had often talked before. I looked at him and said with a soft smile, "You know, my life feels very different now compared to the day we first met." He looked at me with curiosity. "In what way?" he asked. I thought for a moment before answering. "Back then I only came here to build muscles. Now I realize I came here to build something much more important." He raised his eyebrows slightly. And what is that? I looked directly into his eyes and said quietly, a connection, a friendship, maybe even something deeper. For a moment he didn't speak. He simply looked outside the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the distance. Then he turned back toward me, his expression calm but thoughtful. You're right, he said slowly. Some relationships grow in ways we never expect. There was a gentle warmth in his voice that made my heart feel lighter. Over the following days, I began to notice how much we relied on each other's presence. If one of us arrived late at the gym, the other would instinctively look around the room. When one of us was tired or stressed, the other would sense it immediately. It was as if our routines had quietly synchronized. One afternoon, during a training session, I struggled to complete my final set of push-ups. My arms were shaking with exhaustion. He stood beside me and said with a supportive tone, "Come on, just 3 more." I tried again. 1, 2, 3. When I finally finished, I dropped onto the mat, breathing heavily. He laughed softly and offered his hand to help me stand up. "You're stronger than you think," he said. I smiled. And that's because someone kept believing in me. Moments like that became small reminders of how much we inspired each other. Weeks later, we returned once again to the quiet park where we had trained before. The evening sky was painted with shades of orange and gold, and the calm lake reflected the colors beautifully. We walked slowly along the path, talking about life as usual. But that evening felt different. There was a quiet seriousness in our conversation. Finally, he stopped walking and looked at the water. "You know," he said softly, "when people reach my age, they often start believing that the most meaningful chapters of their lives are already behind them." I looked at him with curiosity. "And do you believe that?" He shook his head gently. "No, because meeting you proved that life can still surprise us." His words touched me deeply. I realized that our bond had become something truly special, something built on admiration, trust, emotional closeness, and genuine care. I said quietly, "You changed my life too." He looked at me. "How?" I smiled slightly. "You showed me that strength isn't only about muscles. It's about patience, kindness, and believing in people." For a moment we simply stood there watching the sunset. The silence between us felt meaningful rather than empty. Then he spoke again. "Sometimes love appears in unexpected ways," he said calmly. "Not always in dramatic moments, but in quiet companionship." Those words stayed in my mind long after that evening. From that day forward, our friendship carried an even deeper sense of appreciation. We continued training together, laughing together, and sharing stories just like before. But now there was a clear understanding between us. Our connection wasn't defined by age, labels, or expectations. It was defined by respect, warmth, and the simple joy of being part of each other's lives. Months later, on the anniversary of the day we first met, we finished our workout and sat once again on the same bench inside the gym. The room looked exactly the same as it had the day we met. But we were not the same people anymore. I looked around the gym and smiled. "Funny how everything started right here," I said. He nodded. "Yes, sometimes the most important journeys begin in the simplest places." I realized that what we had built together was something rare. A friendship that had grown into a deep emotional love, calm, respectful, and meaningful. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady and genuine. And sometimes that is the strongest kind of love there is. As we walked out of the gym that night, the cool evening air felt refreshing. The streetlights glowed softly above us, and the world seemed peaceful. For the first time, I truly understood something important. Life isn't only about the goals we chase or the achievements we collect. It's about the people who walk beside us during the journey. And sometimes, the most unexpected person can become the one who changes your life forever.